In 1991, a teenage girl vanished from the centre of London, sparking a nationwide manhunt.
Was she out of the country? Was she being held somewhere against her will? Was she still alive?
The trail would lead the police to the most complex suspect of their careers, a man with a talent for deception and a dangerous desire for what he couldn't have.
Straight away you could see that he was a nasty piece of work, a very nasty piece of work.
He's a walking time bomb. Anybody questions it and he will respond violently, he will respond vigorously to any attempts to undermine them.
But how could detectives trust the evidence when the truth it pointed to was stranger than fiction?
When you see that type of evidence coming through, it makes you hungry to get the next piece so you can find the bad person.
When there's a murder with no suspect, no leads, perhaps not even a body, that's when investigators face their toughest test. The evidence must be gathered, the evidence must be analysed, but the evidence is worthless if you can't pin it to a suspect. The only way to crack the hardest cases of all, the only way to prove what actually happened, the difference between success and failure, critical evidence. September 1991 in Catford, London. A distraught father filed a missing persons report for his 17-year-old daughter, Lynne Rogers. She had been due home after spending the morning at a job interview, but as evening drew in, there was still no sign of her. Police officers had been unable to trace her, and after 12 hours, she still hadn't been in touch. An incident squad was set up, led by Detective Superintendent Douglas Auld.
At that stage, Lynne Rogers to us was just a blank canvas. We didn't know anything about her, her family, or anything else.
Lynne lived at home with her father and sister and had never stayed away from home before. She had a predictable routine centred around her favourite hobby.
She had her own horse at a local stables over in Sidcup. She never missed a visit to that horse, and the whole picture that was beginning to emerge was one of a very stable, sensible young girl.
The investigators wanted to understand more about Lynne's life. Her family said Lynne was ambitious and keen to move ahead in her career in the travel industry.
Lynne Rogers had been made redundant from her job a short while before. She had sent out at least 60 CVs to various job agencies and companies in South East London. She received a reply from a man who telephoned her home about 3 or 4 times, offering her a job as an in-flight secretary for businessmen travelling back and forward to Northern Europe. It carried a salary apparently of £14,000, which was far more than she was earning at that point, and he arranged to meet with her at Charing Cross railway station. The meeting is to be followed by a trip to Shoreham by Sea, a small airport in Sussex, and then on to Gatwick Airport by helicopter, and she was asked to take her passport with her, and she went off to meet him.
This sort of job was far beyond Lynne's age and experience, and the promised helicopter ride suggested this was no ordinary interview. The more the team learned, the more concerned they became.
We had some further information that came from Lynne's sister, and that was a couple of the telephone calls that this man had made to their home, and she had spoken to him. And she mentioned that in the course of these telephone calls, she could hear aircraft noises in the background, and additionally, there was someone saying, talking about an aircraft being prepared for takeoff. Bearing in mind she had taken her passport with her that morning, was she out of the country? Was she being held somewhere against her will? Was she still alive?
As the hours turned into days, Lynne's disappearance became a national news story. and the scale of the inquiry grew.
Teams of officers were put on the trains with photographs of Lynne, asking the passengers if they had seen her on that journey. We had a team of officers underneath the clock and on the concourse at Charing Cross Station with photographs again, asking if anyone had seen her. A man came forward, and he had been in a telephone kiosk some days before in Crawley in Sussex. He had overheard one side of a telephone conversation from a man in the adjacent kiosk. It was quite significant that that conversation this man had overheard almost dovetailed exactly the job description that had been held out to Lynne Rogers.
The huge salary, the helicopter ride, and the international travel. It was an unusual job offer to be making from a public phone box. Also significant was the date, August the 31st, the same day the police knew Lynne had been called by the mystery man. Back in 1991, the detective toolkit was limited. There was no widespread CCTV, and tracing calls was difficult. The phone box itself was the only link to the mystery man who met with Lynne. It could hold the critical evidence they needed.
We had a team of forensic people from the Met, went down to Crawley and examined that phone box from top to bottom. I don't know how many people use a telephone box a day, but maybe 20, 30 minimum. And there was just such a mass and jumble of fingerprints, bits and pieces, that we didn't have any success with our examination of that phone box.
Any evidence had vanished, along with the man and Lynne. Now, 5 days in, the inquiry took a dramatic turn when a girl's body was found 40 miles away in Rotherfield, East Sussex. Detective Superintendent Mike Benison of Sussex Police was in charge of the case.
The body was in dense woodland, lying face down, still fully dressed. The body had been hidden in undergrowth, and some further undergrowth had been taken from a pile of cuttings and that nearby, which was used to try and hide the body from the lane that passed by. It was quite clear at that stage that we were looking at a murder investigation.
To try and identify his Jane Doe, Mike checked missing persons records. One active investigation in London caught his attention.
I was in the incident room at Beckenham when a phone call came through, and it was Mike Benison at the other end. And he asked me a couple of questions about personal descriptions of Lynne Rogers. And one of them was, and I seem to remember, he asked me, does she have a scar on her left knee? But of course he realised then he's probably had a body down there and he's trying to identify who the body is.
He came down, I think it was that evening, to talk about the fact that Lynne had gone missing from home. And was this her? And we were fairly sure that night that it was.
The search for Lynne had ended. Her body lay miles from home, with no indication of how she got there or who had killed her. Before the team could answer those questions, Douglas Auld had to break the terrible news to Lynne's family.
It may not have come to them as an absolute shock, but at the end of the day, it was the girl's father, the girl's sister, and they must have hoped and hoped and hoped that she would walk through the front door. She didn't.
This missing persons inquiry had turned into a murder investigation. The search for Lynne had become a search for her killer. In September 1991, Lynne Rogers, who'd been missing for 5 days, was found dead in a shallow grave in East Sussex. She was just 17 years old. Because of the location of Lynne's body, Sussex Police took over the inquiry from the Met, who had led the missing person investigation. Home Office pathologist Dr. David Rouse was tasked with establishing the cause of death.
What you do is you go through sort of like a mental checklist of looking at the body, sort of deciding what you think is relevant. And obviously young girl, the first thing you think of is that this is going to be a sex crime. And then obviously having a sort of an initial look at the body to see whether there's anything that sort of says to you, this is the cause of death. She had this sort of rash over her face, and it's like sort of tiny pinpoint bleeds into the skin. And then you've then got other marks. You've got bruising around the neck. You've got bruising inside the neck, in the neck structures. Put it all together and you end up with a death of asphyxiation, which is what the formal cause of death was given as, consistent with strangulation.
Detectives now had the cause of death and possible motivation. But Rouse knew that there could be more Lynne's body could tell them.
The body itself will produce a lot of evidence, if you're lucky. There were these abrasions around the chin, and it didn't quite click what they were on the first occasion. In those days, I used to go back and look at the bodies a couple of times, just as bruising develops, which it does after death. It sort of comes out. I went back 2 days later, and by then, these abrasions were sort of blindingly obvious. There was a bite mark on the chin.
A bite mark. This was the first physical trace of the man police were hunting. And it was a chilling one. Like a jigsaw puzzle, this forensic evidence needed another piece to match it to. But with no suspect yet, it was time to go back to basics, to the early days of Lynne's disappearance. Clinton Novell was a rookie officer tasked with the gumshoe detective work this case required.
It was actually my first murder investigation. An inquiry such as, something like that, for a detective, it is the ultimate. That's why you train and you do all the work to become a detective, because you want to get involved in these type of investigations.
As the investigation rapidly expanded, Clinton was part of a team of officers assigned to collect hundreds of witness statements. In murder inquiries such as this, the devil is in the detail.
I can remember I had to take Suzanne's statement, Lynne's sister. My statement was about 95 pages long. We started from Lynne was born, and you went through the entire life cycle. We didn't know at that time who we were looking for. So you have to glean as much information as you possibly can. 90% of it may be totally irrelevant, but until you get to court and you get the conviction, you don't know what's relevant.
One such witness statement proved to be this investigation's next piece of critical evidence. It came from an observant London cabbie. Detective Superintendent Mike Bennison led the case.
Thomas Reynolds was a typical London taxi driver. A man of the world, knew everything, knew everybody. And he saw Lynne standing beside St Enodus Spire at Charing Cross railway station. And he was infatuated by her because she was a young girl, dressed very attractively. And then he saw a blue car drive up, and Lynne walked round to the passenger side and climb in. Reynolds was the last man to see Lynne alive.
When he saw Lynne's picture in the papers, the taxi driver realized that what he had seen could be critical to the case.
Because he couldn't identify the car, but he was savvy enough about cars to know that each manufacturer might have a blue car, but they're all different shades of blues. He was so consumed with what he had seen, he went to car manufacturers and looked at their colour charts, and he identified the colour and therefore the make of the car for us. Absolute crucial piece of evidence.
The police now knew Lynne had made her appointment, and they had the make and model of the car she had got into, a C-Reg Vauxhall Carlton. And there was one more piece of vital information. The driver was wearing a pilot's uniform.
It's one of those light bulb moments. When you get that snippet of information in your briefing, I can guarantee you, you will see the mood of the room lift, because there's something tangible.
But the man behind the wheel was still a mystery. Perhaps the witness who'd seen him make a call to Lynne from the phone box could reveal more.
He could see clearly into the next telephone box. And what he witnessed was this man take out a piece of paper. Clearly it was Lynne Rogers' CV. He remembers seeing her GCSE qualifications and various other parts of the paper. So we were in no doubt that this was the CV that Lynne had sent out to one of the companies. And he also took out a tape recorder or some form of radio. And this man who he was witnessing proceeded to make a telephone call.
The witness described hearing the man talking about a lucrative job in executive travel, chaperoning businessmen across Europe.
He feels it very strange that the man should be going to a public telephone box to speak to somebody about such an important job. He just thought that can't be right. And of course he was absolutely right. It wasn't right.
The man in the phone box had Lynne's CV, and police now believe that this was the same man who'd been seen picking Lynne up in the blue Vauxhall. The question was, how had this man got hold of Lynne's CV? A notebook she'd left behind would point the way.
We discovered at Lynne's home her notebook in which she listed 319 companies. A major part of our inquiry was to establish who's got her CV.
Here, in her own handwriting, were the hundreds of companies she had contacted seeking an interview. When Lynne's sister had spoken to the mystery man on the phone, he'd told her he'd got Lynne's CV from a company in Greenwich, South London. So detectives were excited to find one of the companies in Lynne's notebook had a Greenwich address, a company called Africa Hinterland.
A subsequent check established that the company had gone out of business. But we were very interested in that, so a team went to the business park where Africa Hinterland was situated. Whilst the officers were there, they established the whole business park had a central post room. And they had a system at the business park whereby the firms that had gone out of business, they placed their mail in a separate box.
So all mail to Africa Hinterland was shared with other defunct companies. And one of these companies caught the attention of the investigators.
Casualty Car Doctor, it was called. But a witness at the business park remembered that the owner of it owned a blue Vauxhall, which he thought was C-registered. Good clue, we thought.
A good clue indeed. This could be the same car Lynne had been seen getting into the day she disappeared. It was also strong evidence that the man who drove the blue Vauxhall also had access to the mailbox where Lynne had sent her CV. And then this witness went one better and gave the police a name.
He also knew the man as Wayne Scott Singleton and that he came from Crawley. Well, of course, we know that the phone call to Lynne's home was made from Crawley because we knew that a man in Crawley had seen her CV through a telephone kiosk next door.
But this was only half the picture they needed. Unless they could also place this man in the phone box the day the call to Lynne was made, their lead would turn into a dead end.
Transpired that Wayne Scott Singleton had been in to the post office, which was immediately next to the telephone boxes, that morning, and cashed a gyro.
Unemployed Singleton had cashed a state benefits check, or gyro, at the post office right next to the phone box. The date stamp on the gyro placed him at the scene the same day the call had been made to Lynne, August the 31st. This was critical evidence.
The cashing of the gyro tells us that Wayne Scott Singleton was in Crawley at the very time this phone call was made. So we started to look at Wayne Scott Singleton from that moment on.
35-year-old Singleton was a married father of two, but had separated from his wife and now had a long-term girlfriend. He split his time between their homes and his. A background check revealed a criminal past.
Wayne Scott Singleton was effectively a petty criminal, got some convictions, nothing too serious, but of course, even though they weren't too serious, we were looking now at a major crime.
Detectives aren't in the habit of throwing mud at innocent people, and Singleton might appear to be just that. After all, thousands of people own blue cars, hundreds of people use the phone box, and dozens more could have accessed the mailbox. But only one man connected all three dots, and police don't believe in coincidences.
I think a lot of things started to come together. We had the car identified, we had his name, there's all the snippets of information, and then you suddenly get more information, you think, hold on, we've got that name, right. Their profile raises from one of the names in the pot into, oh, this is a person of interest, into, oh, this really is interesting, into, you're now nominated suspect.
With circumstantial evidence against Singleton mounting, he had questions to answer. The team decided to play their hand.
It was a massive, massive operation. We were going to hit multiple addresses in the southeast, in London, in Sussex, in Crawley. We were going to hit them all at exactly the same time, so that anybody in those addresses couldn't get hold of him and let him know that we were looking for him.
We arrested Singleton on the 28th of September, having gathered what we thought was sufficient evidence with which to charge him. Certainly there was enough to suspect him of the murder of Lynne Rogers.
With Singleton now in custody, detectives hoped they'd finally get some answers. But he wasn't playing ball.
I did in fact see Singleton when he was brought into Crawley Police Station in custody, just to introduce myself to him as the senior investigating officer. Straight away you could see that he was a nasty piece of work, a very nasty piece of work.
Scott Singleton is probably one of 2 or 3 people in my entire career who was as complex in his character as he was.
In fact, the team would soon realize that they would have their work cut out separating fact from fiction in Singleton's life. While he sat in a cell, police searched his home and found some unusual items.
We'd found a pilot's uniform, and we know from the witness Reynolds that the person sitting in the car who picked Lynne up was wearing a pilot's uniform. We found this scanner, which was tuned into several different frequencies through which he could receive airline transmissions. And that's what we thought he'd used to make the various calls to Lynne Rogers and her family. Within the background, the airport noises or control tower noises, with him saying that Flight 101 was clear for takeoff. He just interrupting the scanner as these various messages were coming over.
A disturbing picture was beginning to emerge. It appeared that Singleton had more than just a casual interest in aviation. It looked like he might be passing himself off as a pilot. But the evidence had thrown up more questions than answers. Who was this man, and why was he leading a double life? To understand what happened to Lynne, they would need to understand Singleton himself.
A murder investigation is like a jigsaw puzzle. I'll give you a 10,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, but I just throw it up into the air. No picture, and then say, put it all together. We just might get one piece of that jigsaw that we're looking for, and that opens up, and it allows us to see the true picture.
3 weeks into the hunt for 17-year-old Lynne Rogers' killer, the police made a breakthrough. They'd traced the owner of the car she'd been seen getting into. The same man was seen in the phone box calling her, and it looked like he had pretended to be a pilot to lure her to an interview. Scott Singleton was now in custody, and detectives were beginning to untangle the threads of his strange life. Singleton had 2 women in his life, his former wife Pat and current girlfriend Kim. Both these women believed he was a qualified pilot. He wasn't, but he'd gone to great lengths to embellish his lie.
We established that, in fact, he has had flying lessons. He's been up to Stableford Airfield, just in North London. He's a member of a club up there. In fact, pretended on one occasion to fly a plane to Belgium and convinced either Kim or Pat that he was the pilot, when in fact he never touched the controls. He merely sat beside the pilot.
Multiple identities, multiple different lifestyles, multiple addresses, multiple partners. He's spinning a web of deceit every time he does something.
Dr. Donna Youngs is an investigative psychologist who interprets behavior to give an insight into criminal minds.
There was no real Scott Singleton. The problem is, without having any clear sense of who you are, is that you don't have any clear morals or any clear standards, because you don't exist as a core person in order to make those judgments. There is nothing underneath the identity that he has created. He's a walking time bomb.
Singleton got hold of her CV. He just happened to chance upon it. He phoned her and pretended to be the owner of an exclusive private jet company where they needed young, bright, intelligent, attractive females to work on their private jets to look after corporate clients. Lynne had heard in the background when Singleton was talking to her, he went, "Hold on for a moment, Flight 101, you are clear," or "clear for takeoff," words like that. Lynne was convinced that she was talking to somebody who was genuine in the aviation industry. How he met Lynne was pre-planned and premeditated. It was so calculating, so cold.
To Singleton, lying was second nature. He built his life on deception and managed to fool those closest to him. But convincing the police was a different matter.
When people lie in interviews, I love it. Because I can prove that lie, maybe not then, but I can prove that lie, or that lie will be proven later on. It's a process, it's a very strategic game.
Singleton's lies came thick and fast. Police quickly established Singleton wasn't where he said he was on the day of Lynne's murder.
He made revelations to the fact that he was either with his girlfriend, Kim, or with his wife, Pat, on those days. Singleton had written in his diary on the 4th of September, phoned round from Pat's. And it was quite clear it had been written between the lines.
He even roped his wife and girlfriend into his misdirection.
In those early days, Kim and Pat gave alibis supporting what he was saying. They felt that they should support him, I suppose, as any husband, wife or girlfriend would. I think as time went on, they subsequently thought, I could be in trouble here if I continue with this alibi. Very quickly, they started getting a bit shaky. We subsequently established that their alibis were false anyway.
Even his name was a lie.
His name was Andre Reich, which he changed to Wayne Scott Singleton because he thought that it sounded better. Gave him a better persona, if you like.
Andre Reich, it's an unusual name. Did he want to drift into a greyer world where people wouldn't remember him? When people remember you, you're always above that radar. When people forget you, you become a bit grey.
The Crown Prosecution Service had given the team just 36 hours to get the critical evidence they needed. But unraveling Singleton's complex life had eaten up precious time, and they still couldn't prove murder. Detectives have to find that second jigsaw piece, the one that would fit the telltale bite mark.
What we needed was a dental impression from Wayne Scott Singleton to compare with the bite mark on Lynne's chin. He refused point blank to give one, even when sort of said this would confirm whether or not he had bitten Lynne on the chin. He refused point blank. Reason for that is because he knew that the bite mark on Lynne's chin was his. We held him in custody for as long as we could. We discussed it in detail with the CPS, but they felt at that time that primarily most of the evidence was circumstantial, that because we couldn't prove the bite mark was Singleton's, that he should be released.
Singleton was free, but Benison's team had one advantage: Holmes. an information system which logged every witness call to ensure no vital clues were overlooked.
You might get 2,000 phone calls. Reality, 10% of those phone calls may be useful. The other 90% would divide between total and utter rubbish to malicious or false. But every one of those phone calls has to be assessed, rationalised, and either discounted quickly or examined. It can create a huge amount of work. But then perversely, we just might get one piece of that jigsaw that we're looking for.
All of a sudden, somebody comes running in one day. You'll never believe this, Governor. Somebody saw the car in Rotherfield. He'd seen a blue Vauxhall Carlton parked in a lane just off the road near Rotherfield where Lynne was found. And he became a little bit suspicious, so he in fact took the number of the car and the make, and he wrote it down on a piece of paper which he kept on his mantelpiece. Great, get out there, make sure you get the piece of paper with a number written on it, and get back here tooth sweet to confirm what we're looking at.
The car the witness saw was Singleton's.
He got the number correct, he got the vehicle correct, he got the colour correct. So as soon as we got that evidence, again, it put Singleton in the area of Rotherfield, which of course he denied throughout the inquiry, that he'd ever been there.
In the days before CCTV became the eyes and ears of the police, witness sightings like this were crucial. They could link Singleton to the body site. Now they had to link him to Lynne's body. They needed to find a way to match the bite mark to Singleton, but he had refused to provide a sample.
It was almost like we had a subgroup within the investigation, and we were the teeth team. That was our pure job. Find those teeth. Didn't have computer records like we do now. Couldn't tap into a national health database. So it's literally get the list of the dentists in that area and go and knock on the doors. I can remember waking dentists up or getting them out to their offices at 10:30 at night. If there was a chance that those teeth were in that office, I wasn't leaving until I'd examined that office and got the dentist to confirm with me, because I had another 100 to do the next day. Remember, you've got multiple identities. What name were we looking for? It just went on and on, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
We did find his dentist. We visited that dentist, and initially they were able to provide an x-ray of his teeth plus his dental records. That was no use whatsoever, and we needed what they call a study model, which is a plaster impression of his teeth. Initially, when we made the inquiry at the dental practice, we thought that the dental impression or the study model had been destroyed, which is normal practice.
Dentist, he is a patient here, no, haven't got the castings, we destroy them. We got the stroke of luck. Somebody comes back from holiday, they're speaking about, the police came around, yada yada. Oh, we've got them in the back cupboard.
She immediately phoned us. We got very excited. Go round, get it, make sure you don't break it.
The team now had a dental sample from Singleton to compare to the bite mark on Lynne's body. The question was, would it fit? Only a forensic odontologist could tell them. Crime Sciences consultant Roger Summers explains how the specialist on the case did this.
Bite marks are unique, and the practice of forensic odontology is the correct interpretation of a bite mark. The odontologist will actually compare the bite mark against the dentition of the suspect. It can be considered to be either definitive or similar, and this is where the interpretation is vitally important. And there are some unique features. It may be that one of the teeth is buckled, or it may be indeed one of the teeth that are missing. It may be that one of the teeth or teeth are actually chipped, which again are all useful indicators, vital points of comparison, which then are giving us that uniqueness.
Comparing teeth marks is an inexact science. It cannot be as conclusive as DNA. But the odontologist who compared the cast of Singleton's teeth to the mark on Lynne's body was clear. This bite mark was Singleton's.
He has got very unique formation of his teeth, and that matches to within a very high percentage the marks on Lynne's chin.
My goodness, what a revelation that was. The whole team was excited, elated. We knew we'd got our man.
The case against Singleton was now overwhelming. Detectives could link him to the calls to Lynne, her body, and the site where she was hidden. On the 10th of October, he was rearrested and charged. The police had secured the critical evidence, but could they secure a conviction? To convince a jury, they'd have to suggest a motive.
My own personal thought. He picked up Lynne's CV and saw an opportunity. Was she going to be, in his mind, his next target? As in, you know, she's going to be my girlfriend, or she's going to be my next conquest. Did he try to have a relationship with her and she rejected him? From what I know about Lynne, quite possibly. But then she could identify him. Would she report him to the police? From what I know about Lynne, yes. What does Singleton do? He wants to continue living his life. He's got to stop a witness.
The fact that she resisted sent him obviously into some sort of frenzy, some panic. I don't know what he did, but he obviously must have lost his temper with her.
He's been able to very effectively present himself as this successful, handsome pilot. And then clearly he makes some kind of advance at her and she rejects him. Now, genuine, handsome, virile pilots do not get rejected by young girls. So by rejecting him, she was essentially questioning his identity. She was questioning everything that he had created, this whole pilot persona. She was rejecting everything that he was, and his response was to murder her.
I think the last moments of Lynne's life must have been terrifying. She must have been terrified. Here, she's in a car with a stranger. We don't know where they went or what happened, whether they went to an address, whether she was murdered in the car. We don't know. But what we do know, that she met a terrible end. And she must have been absolutely frightened out of her life.
But as the police prepared for trial, they didn't realize their investigation against Singleton wasn't over yet. A final piece of critical evidence was about to be uncovered, one which would take them deep into the dark world of a killer. Police had charged Scott Singleton with the abduction and murder of 17-year-old Lynne Rogers. A jury must now decide whether Singleton, a man of multiple identities, had lured Lynne to an appointment in central London to offer her a dream job which didn't exist, and whether, when she saw through his lies, he had killed her. Despite powerful evidence against Singleton, one element of this case had yet to be explained. Detectives believe that Singleton called Lynne 4 times in the lead-up to her disappearance. They knew some of the details of the calls, thanks to Lynne's sister Suzanne, who had taken a message on her behalf.
She explains that Lynne isn't there, but this man still goes on to explain that he wants to offer Lynne this amazing job as a secretary, accompanying executives during flights. And during the conversation, in the background, she can hear what she thinks is an airport control tower. And during that conversation as well, Singleton at one stage interrupts to tell Flight 101 that they're clear for takeoff.
The question was, how had Singleton created this deception? Police originally thought he'd used a radio scanner. Then, something strange happened. Singleton was skilled at manipulating the truth and those closest to him. But as the saying goes, if you play with fire, you'll get burned. Police learned that his girlfriend was about to switch sides, and that she had an incriminating tape which could prove once and for all who made the phone calls to Lynne. Mid-trial, and with a verdict looming, there was no time to lose.
I get back to the office 9, 10 o'clock at night. I set up about a dozen tape decks. And I've got 400 or 500 tapes. And I just put them all in. I turn them all to a reasonable level, and I turn them all on. And you can imagine I've got a wall of different noise. I've got country and western, I've got rock, I've got pop. And all I'm listening for is Flight 101. And I'm listening to all of this noise. And about 3:30 in the morning, I'm on my own. The noise is getting to me. And it went Flight 101.
Flight 101, clear of takeoff.
And I just hit every tape. Now, I didn't know what tape it came from. So I've now got to play back 12 tapes, but I've only got to play them back 30 seconds. And I've got it.
Flight 101, clear of takeoff.
I've found Flight 101. I took great delight. I picked the phone up and I dialed the number for the boss, who was none too impressed with being woken up at 3:30 in the morning until I said, I've got it in my hand.
Runway 3, clear of takeoff.
It contained Singleton practicing, or whatever he was doing. I think he alleged that he'd made it one day while he was practicing, talking about flights, pretending to be a pilot, pretending to be an air traffic controller.
Lynne couldn't speak for herself, but I'm holding in my hand that tape that Singleton played when he was talking to her. Have that. Beautiful.
That really was the icing on the cake. And when the jury heard that, you could see that they were aghast.
The tape was the final piece of critical evidence which proved Singleton was Lynne's murderer. For his girlfriend, years of loyalty had worn thin. He had finally told one lie too many.
Well, we couldn't believe it because all the way along, she was appearing for the defence. And at the 11th hour, here we go, she comes forward and gives evidence for the prosecution.
Why she did it, I don't know, but I'm very glad she did.
It's hard to remain loyal to somebody who everything that they have presented to you is false. What are you remaining loyal to? I mean, how do you remain loyal to somebody who everything that you've had with them has been based on lies?
Singleton's tower of lies had collapsed. Lynne Rogers was the only one to see him for what he really was. There was no glamorous job in the airline industry, no hefty pay rise, no opportunities for international travel. There wasn't even a job interview, just a very cunning attempt to trap a naive and vulnerable young girl, which, sadly, worked.
I think it was an awful crime. 17-year-old girl who thought she was going to find a better job, to do something she'd always wanted to do, and that was travel. To come to the end she did.
Singleton was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1992. He was convicted thanks to a meticulous police case and a trail of overwhelming critical evidence.
I can't describe, as a detective, how when you see that type of evidence coming through, it makes you hungry to get the next piece. You don't give up. It took us a long time to find Singleton. It was worth every second.